Well, welcome everyone to the Tennessee Native Plant Society Native Plant Series of speeches, of seminars. And it's good to see so many faces. We're going to be starting just momentarily. I had a couple things I needed to share. Excuse me, I think I'm going to lose my voice. We have on December 10th, not the third Tuesday, but the second Tuesday. Excuse me. The second Tuesday of December, we're not going to have a seminar in December, as we seldom do, but we're going to have a panel discussion on the 10th. There will be at least 3 of us talking and sharing and answering your questions. The topic is plant ordinances in Tennessee, native plant ordinances. We're trying to, and are succeeding very nicely at establishing ordinances, at least in some of the local jurisdictions, that are require the planting of native plants with new construction and prohibit the planting of invasive species. So it's something that we can do across the state on small scale in your town, your county. And when we get enough momentum with this, hopefully we'll be able to go to the state and say, let's get on the ball statewide. Let's have a statewide law, ordinance, or whatever it takes to protect the native plants and plant them instead of all these foreign plants. So if it's got you curious of how you might be able to help out, then please join us at a panel discussion on December 10th. And we will record it so that it should be available afterwards. And all right, without further ado, I think I would like to go ahead and welcome our speaker tonight, Adam Bigelow. He calls himself a plant nerd, so he's going to fit in real well with the rest of us. Yeah, excuse me. He leads hikes throughout Appalachia and looking at wildflowers, and that's what we're going to do tonight. He's going to lead us on a walk through the wildflowers, through the seasons, and throughout the whole region there. Mostly what we've heard about that area recently has been all kinds of negative, but maybe he'll tell us a little bit about what's going to survive or what may survive. But without further ado, I'm going to say welcome, Adam. We're so glad to have you, and you'll need to put your slideshow on now.
Thank you. I sure will. And I want to say thank you to come and talk about today. I love getting to share my love, joy, and passion of native plants and wildflowers with other people, and especially when those people are plant people themselves. Been plants and living in, I've lived in the mountains of just southern Appalachia for about 30 years, studying plants and working with them for about 20 years. And one of my favorite things when I'm giving a talk and in person, and so maybe this presentation is being displayed on a big screen behind me, is seeing little flowers like this spring beauty right here blown up on magnificent size because they have no idea how tiny it is. But I do have a ecotourism business here in Cullowhee, North Carolina, called Bigelow's Botanical Excursions. And in case you didn't know, Cullowhee, North Carolina is the center of plant love of the southeastern U.S. And I'll say that boldly. because it's the home of the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference. Really been involved with for a long time and really love to do. So, hey, let's see. There we go. Okay, I'll do that way. So yeah, I have the joy of being in this bioregion, most diverse in the temperate world, and I get to want to actually come walk in the woods with me and take me for a walk. I'm getting a little Doppler feed out here in that too.
Mhm.
Everybody muted?
I think most of us are.
Karen, are you?
I'm looking through now, and I think everybody's muted except you and I.
Right. Maybe if you mute, I don't know if that.
We'll try.
Sure. But I get to walk people out to a location like this, and often folks think that they're coming on one of my walks, and they come geared out for a long hike, and I get to um, expectations on that because it's a walk, of course, and we're not going to go and we're not going to move fast. This high elevation bald leading out to an area called Old Bald is actually about a 20-minute walk from the. It's one of the fun to do. This is the Southern Appalachian bioregion. Circle in, and I'm really honored that Horn is in the room. I use his book a whole lot in work and in teaching. So having that book centered in this area is really special because I don't have to deal with nukums and know that there's all kinds of plants in the Northeast that live in the high elevations of Southern Appalachian Mountains, but that our book doesn't really cover the southern plants that live here. So I'm really grateful for that. But really, Appalachia. This is what's of Southern Appalachia. This is Blue Ridge Parkway, one of the many places. And for me, the love of this temperate rainforest and diversity is matched in my world. I grow up with nature connection, and I came to this kind of accidentally. And some 20, some odd, probably 25 years ago now, I accidentally fell with wildflowers, and it's been my longest, most successful relationship in my life. And I hope to actively stay in love with wildflowers for the rest of my life. And for 3/4 of the year, it's just joy and celebration walking outside the door of my house and into places like this, or driving really close and getting into places like this. But we're right now getting into a time here that is, fall is very beautiful, but desolate, horrible, miserable year where there's nothing growing and everything's brown and cold, dark all the time. You just find yourself sitting in a rocking chair in front of a wood stove, flowers of Tennessee, Ohio Valley, and Southern Appalachia, while sipping on bourbon. Why am I even continuing in the world? Why they're out there? All of a sudden, springtime comes, and for most people, springtime gives thoughts of warmth. Warmth is what they go with springtime, and they're like, "Oh, it's spring when it's warm, and then it turns back to winter when it's cold again." But I get confused. When it's warm all the time of year we call summer. Spring, like other transitional time, fall that we're in right now, can contain all the seasons, sometimes in a single day. And this is the unopened flower bud of the umbilicatum. You'll have to trust umbilicatum. But there is this one set up, and it's probably 3,000 feet in elevation, up an area called Moses. And a long time I have been the very first spring wildflower that appears. During that desolate time of winter, we are our culture is so out of balance that we're forced to celebrate New Year's and go out and celebrate on December 1st, or maybe stay home and have our own celebrations at home. The next day, brand new year, and we're supposed to like celebrate ground on December 31st. Look at the ground January 1st. There's no difference. Nothing has changed. And that's the time of year where so many people are trying to make these sale life changes. They're trying to change when nothing is changing in our northern world. And so, but springtime comes because the day before this trout lily was trying to open itself up in the snow, there was no sign of it on the ground at all, and then it emerges and it starts progression that leads to the full beauty of. Now, I celebrate trout lily as the first wildflower of the spring, but every time I do, it kind of laughs at me because red maple are really among the first to bloom. Flower of a red maple.
Adam, I'm going
Yeah.
to ask a pause.
Okay.
Your voice is cutting out badly. Does anybody have any suggestions on what this might be? We've had everybody muted but Adam,
Yeah.
and it's still happening. I have no clue.
Well, let me try. I'm using Bluetooth buds, and so I could try to just and see if the computer audio could work. Let me try that.
Okay. Thank you.
So if I speak now, can you hear me?
Yes.
No?
You're distant.
I can't get closer to the screen. Um, but if you can hear me or not, I don't know what else to do. I could try to reconnect the headphones.
It's you're sounding fine, except
The
it's
volume.
not
Yeah.
it's not real loud. So if anybody doesn't hear very well, please turn up the volume for your audio. You should be able to turn up your audio somewhere.
Yeah, okay.
Otherwise, I think we're good to go. Much better.
How about that?
Thank you.
I'll do the best I can. But I was saying that every time I describe the trout lily flowers as the first wildflower of the year, the red maple trees get mad at me because they know they're really first. And this is the flower of a red maple that had fallen off of a tree from the wind and landed on a bed of moss. So, but the trout lily starts a progression of blooming that just gets my heart racing, and it gets me out of my rocking chair and put the bourbon down and go walking in the woods, because it's just one after another of a celebration of joy in the springtime. Of course, the trout lilies blooming there with the hepatica, such an unfortunate, ugly sounding name for such a beautiful flower. Liverwort or liver leaf doesn't really help it much, but it's so beautiful. They are Cutiloba or rotundifolia, I guess, and the Americana, and they are the hepatica, such a beautiful flower, really distinctive leaf shape, and it just starts with there, and next thing you know, the entire floor of the forest is covered in flowers. But it's really, truly, I want to see that very first one bloom of the year. I consider myself a flower stalker, and will go and check this one location. And my friends in the region are always kind of surprised that I can find the first blooming trout lily at a higher elevation than they see it in Asheville, or even sometimes in the Piedmont. But the trout lily, the hepatica, and then things really get going. I love this really blown up picture of the spring beauty, because it really shows at first glance the spring beauty flower looks like a pink petaled flower, but when you get up close and look at it, you see that it's white petals with pinkish stripes, and sometimes they even glisten in certain light and can look like icing or frosting. And that pink or red and white can really make it seem like it might want to taste like peppermint candy. It does not taste like peppermint candy. I did that work for you. You know, don't eat those. But one of the common names of the spring beauty is fairy spuds because they do have an edible root part. But I like to leave them in the wild and not dig them out. And I think I would have to have like a whole population to get the size of a meal for a potato. And then the spring beauty bee would really be missing out if she wasn't able to collect that pink pollen. Some of the flowers that I love to go see and teach about, you know, I have to travel and go see things. You know, I just got back from a trip to Eastern North Carolina and stopped into the green swamp and got to see the Venus flytraps on the ground. But some things are so common, they have common in their name, like the common blue violet here in this picture. And you can go out and see them in your yard of the springtime. And there's flowers and diversity everywhere. Appalachian folk, mountain settlers used to pick violet leaf or flowers and candy them by dipping them into sugar water and letting them dry. Or you can take egg white and sugar and make a little paint and wash and candy violets to decorate cakes. For me, the violets are not just beautiful, but they are delicious. They make up a big part of my spring salads. And the flowers are loaded with color, which is anthocyanins and really good for us. And they have a little bit of flavor. They're not really super sweet unless you get the sweet white violet. But not a lot of people realize you can also eat the violet leaves. They're loaded in nutrition. They're heart-shaped, following the doctrine of signatures, meaning they're good for the heart. And violet leaves contain 5 times more vitamin C per volume than an orange does. Now, granted, to get the same volume of an orange, you need to pick a whole big bowl of violet leaves. But once you pick that bowl, then you'd have 5 times more vitamin C than the orange. You'd have vitamin A that the orange doesn't contain. It wasn't grown in industrial agriculture conditions in Central or South America and picked early, artificially ripened while it was shipped using fossil fuels to come sit on a grocery store where 40% of them are thrown away. But rather, it was picked for free in your yard, and the only energy costs were what you ate for breakfast the morning of going out and doing it. They also contain a nutritional component that younger folk don't really need to worry about too much, but the older we get, the more we'll need it. And that is, in botanical terminology, we call that mucilage. But that sounds nasty and gross because it is. It's the sliminess of things like okra or sassafras leaves. You know, in nutritional science, so to make it more marketable, they call it soluble fiber. Ironically, the #1 product sold on TV for soluble fiber is Metamucil. So, you know, really they're saying metamucilage and it's sliminess, but you can get that sliminess, that good heart health of soluble fiber from the leaves of the violets. And they're really a mild taste. So you can actually use them to thicken soups and stews like you would sassafras leaves. So I encourage you to eat your Wheaties in the springtime and go out and pick your violets. I do want to caution you though, if you pick a big bowl of violets for your salad, don't go on a long car ride or take a long hike right afterwards because you will be making big fluffy foods. That many in the horticultural industry, not native plant horticulture, but just the bigger, broader world, they're often lying to us about things. You can go to a big box store nursery, you know, one of those big box stores I'm not supposed to name, like Home Depot or Lowe's or Walmart or the Devil or one of those places, and buy plants that they call geraniums, and they're not geraniums. Those hardy geraniums are the house plant. This is a geranium. I love the wild geranium flowers. They have a long bloom time for a wildflower garden, even as each individual flower is only open for a couple days at the most, and really beautiful. And you can see the previous flower parts, the pistils and stamens down below. I'm going to assume that you all remember all the different parts of the flower and all their names because you're the Tennessee Native Plant Society, and also because you were taught that in elementary school. And your elementary school teacher, she was a saint and a gifted educator, and she taught you all the top parts of the plant and flower. And if you don't remember, it's not her fault, it's yours. We are talking pistils and stamens, and the pistil is comprised of the stigma, style, and ovary, and the stamen is the anther and the filament, and the anther produces the pollen. Your elementary school teacher, also 95% chance she was a she, even to this day. She probably doesn't teach it the way I like to teach it when I'm on my walks, because I like to use humor and storytelling to get people to learn things. So, the pistil, the female part, females, y'all can be real pistils who are often stigmatized for your style. If you don't know the ovaries on the female side, then you got another problem. Whereas on the other side, the pollen producing, you have to stay, man. You think you know all the anthers, but the women will fill them in later. Stamen, anther, filament, pistil, stigma. I'm moving on. Some of my photographs might be able to be used as identification, like that wild geranium previously. But this one is a little bit more stylized. This is a top-down view of the foam flower, Tiarella cordifolia. And I love this photo of it from the top down because it really shows it looking like a crown of individual flowers and the salmon-colored anthers. It's such a beautiful plant, and I love its botanical name as well, Tiarella cordifolia. And so were you to look at those words and transliterate them out from the botanical Latin, cordifolia obviously meaning heart-shaped leaf, and tiarella is related with the word tiara, and ella being a diminutive, so that's a little crown. So this plant's name is the little crown with the heart-shaped leaf. And I think that's poetry in the plant. Funflower comes from their tendency to grow in such abundance by the sides of creeks that it often looks like some of that foam that sometimes forms in a creek has washed up onto the side of the shore. Now, of course, those fancy horticulturalists have combined this plant fairly recently in horticulture with the Cucura to make Cucurella, and I just think that's a weird Frankenstein plant. But I like straight species myself. This is the storied rare plant. This one is not going to be growing in your yard unless you bought some or somehow found your way, or you live within one of the 5 counties in the world that it grows. This is the famed and storied Oconee bell. And I was just visiting with my friends Jeff and Jody Zahner of Chautauqua Gardens and Cashers, and they have a license to propagate and sell Oconee bells. And I was at their house, and they have a really, really big patch. But it is considered by some, I guess, the rarest wildflower in North America, only because of its small geographic range and as narrow endemic right there in the Blue Ridge Escarpment, where the Appalachian Mountains drop off to the Piedmont so rapidly. And most of its original range is now underwater at Lake Toxaway, Lake Jocassee and Kiowa. So it's even more restricted. But when you go and see this plant growing where it likes to grow, Devil's Fork State Park in upstate South Carolina and other places, it's in such abundance that you wouldn't think it was rare, but that's about the only place in the world you can see it. Although they did discover a new variety that's in a whole different county. It's a whole different conversation. This, of course, is Sanguinaria canadense, the bloodroot, aptly named because were you to dig up the rhizome and break it open, it oozes a reddish orange blood-like sap. And it used to be used freely medicinally. It was a ingredient in toothpaste, and had some other medicinal uses. And mountain kids, Appalachian kids, would dig this plant up and use that sap to draw on their hands or arms or faces, or pretend like they were putting on lipstick and stain themselves. And I don't recommend letting kids do that, because this plant in the poppy family has some really toxic alkaloids, and you can use that fresh sap to burn off warts and skin tags. And if you're into the morbid side of life, there is a website you can look up that shows some people that played with it too much, and they're really horribly disfigured faces. But one of my favorite things about this bloodroot is when it first emerges, it's so beautiful. That unopened flower, it looks like an egg sitting on top of a very narrow stalk. And I imagine that it would be really top heavy. Its leaf emerges at the same time as the flower, and the leaf is a palmate lobed leaf. So it's like like your hand. And every time when it comes up, that leaf is wrapped around the stem of the flower, helping to hold the flower up until it's strong enough to hold up on its own. And you can see that in this picture, just wrapped around in the stem of the flower, poking through the middle. And it's like, who doesn't need a helping hand every once in a while? But I really want to dig deeper into that and encourage you all to give a hand to yourself every once in a while. It's easy to want to help others, but sometimes we need to give that same energy and helpful spirit to ourselves. So give yourself a break and help yourself, like the bloodroot helps itself hold itself up from the snows and winds of springtime. Now, before I start telling a story about this plant, I just want y'all to know that I am in North Carolina, where it's legal for me to talk about this, not necessarily in Tennessee. But this is Jack in the pulpit, of course, or is it Jill in the pulpit? It's really progressive church they preach at. They let the men and the women preach up there in the pulpit. And of course, Jack in the pulpit has separate plants for male or female flowers. And so their flowers aren't perfect like some of the others we've seen, like the bloodroot, but they are in different houses, or they're in different plants. And it used to be for me to figure out which was which, whether I was looking at a male flowered or a female flowered plant. I would have to go peeking up under their robes. And you don't want to really do that up in the pulpit too much. You can get yourself into trouble. But I was taught it, and you'd have to look way down into the bottom of the tube to see if there were pistils or stamens in there. But I was taught a trick a few years ago that holds up really well. And it is the male flowered plants have a single trifoliate leaf with the plant, and the female flowered plants have two trifoliate leaves. And the reason for that is, many of you already know this, but it takes more energy to be a female than it does to be a male. And this is what would get me in trouble in Tennessee, perhaps, is that depending on the needs of the population, if in one season there are too many male flowered plants or there are too many female flowered plants, after they go dormant for the year, some of these plants can actually change their sex and emerge as the opposite sex in the next year. So they actually exhibit gender fluidity, which don't tell the legislature. I love this little flower. This is the ruin enemy, Thalictrum thalictroides, the thalictrum that looks like thalictrum. But I love calling it windflower, one of its other common names. And it's another one of these small, top-heavy flowering plants in the springtime. And I was given a trick for photographing plants by a photographer, a friend of mine, some years ago, that what you want to do is you frame up and you get the frame and the image you want to take, you capture, and then you take a long, slow inhalation, a deep breath in, hold it, and then you exhale slowly. And at the end of your exhale is when you take the picture. I have learned that if I am lying on the forest floor taking a photo of the windflower, and I do that, I will never get a clear shot of it. because the slightest breeze sends this flower to shaking. So with this one, I have to hold my breath and hope it comes out pretty well. This one did okay. Speaking of lying on the forest floor, um, I do have a tendency of laying on the ground in the woods, taking photographs of wildflowers. And this is the Indian cucumber root, Mediola virginica. And it is such a beautiful flower that nods below the leaves. And I actually made some friends that are still my friends. We met for the first time when I was laying on the forest floor, and they were hiking by and came to check on me to make sure I hadn't died of a heart attack or something. But when I got home and saw this image that I was able to capture, I think I might have had a minor heart challenge. I love this. You know, when it comes to flowers, where they're aiming and where they're advertising to is a reflection of what's pollinating. So with nodding flowers, as they're looking downwards, they're trying to attract low flying and ground crawling insects for their pollination. This plant, though, also has another beautiful show at the end of the year when it puts on its beautiful fall color and its berry ripens up into a really vivid bluish black. And it's trying to attract animals like birds and some other critters to eat the berry, fly away with it, and spread its seed that way. And so if it was hiding below the leaves, it would be less successful. So this plant, as the fruit ripens, that stem gets tight and it actually lifts the seed, the ripening seed, above the leaf. So it's a nodding flower, but an erect seed display. And then that bluish black fruit, that berry, has the leaves on the top there turn a vivid red, so it stands out from the background and the birds can see it from a distance. Such a beautiful plant. It's called Indian cucumber root because were you to dig some up, you would find just below the ground it would swell into its rhizome, and it is a white and fleshy and tastes like a freshly picked cucumber. But it's really small. I've never seen one larger than the diameter of my pinky. And to get enough for a meal to share with a couple of friends for a salad or a cucumber salad or something, you'd have to decimate entire populations. And I think that would be pretty sad. So I don't recommend nibbling on this one. I will admit to eating Solomon seal every once in a while. This is the Solomon seal, the giant Solomon seal. You can tell because it's got more than 2 flowers dangling down below. I'm not sure, and I'll leave it to the plant systematicists and real botanists in the world to if this is a variety or its own species. I think they're still working that out. But a lot of people don't realize that the shoots of Solomon seal can be eaten fresh in the springtime like asparagus. And you want to catch them when they're in their asparagus stage, which is how I describe it when it's just a shoot and all of the leaves and flower buds are folded into that tender tip. And it's really fresh and delicious. My favorite ones to eat in abundance, though, are at my neighbor's house. They're those green and white variegated Japanese ones. And then I'll leave these wild ones out in the woods a little bit. But they are delicious and tasty. The Cherokee would make no distinction between harvesting Solomon seal and Solomon's plume, what was formerly called false Solomon seal. And they both can be eaten fresh like that, and they're very tasty as a trail nibble, or you can grab a handful and steam them or saute them up. Solomon seal gets its name because of the rhizome that has these roundish marks on it that are said to look like a signet ring, which is how people like King Solomon from the Bible would write a message on paper, seal it with wax, and then dip their ring into it to seal it. And that's how you knew it was from that person. Everybody had their own rings. So that's where it's called Solomon's seal. Now, I'm on the bandwagon of not calling plants false. I think they're real and beautiful and deserving of their own beautiful common names. The false Solomon seal, I prefer calling it Solomon's plume, because of that plume of flowers at the terminal end. So it's also a descriptive common name, which is helpful. Speaking of fun common names, this is Mitella diphylla, the bishop's cap or the mitre wort. And it gets its name because it's said that that beautiful tiny bell-shaped flower looks like the hats bishops wear in the Roman Catholic or the Episcopal Church. And those hats are called mitres. So little mitre or mitella, and then mitre wort. And I was giving a walk a couple of years ago in the springtime to the Western North Carolina Episcopal Diocese of their spousal retreat. So like Jack in the Pulpit, they allow both men and women to be ministers in the Episcopal Church. And they, so their spouses were on this retreat. And there was a woman, when I showed them the bishop's cap, and I told that story, she got really excited because her husband is a bishop. And she pulled up a picture of her husband wearing his mitre. And it looked nothing like this. I have no idea why they call it that. It's just ridiculous. But I think it's such a beautiful, dainty plant. It's one of the true spring ephemerals. So it spends most of its life each year underground and dormant, and just to come and shine in the springtime. And it's a really gorgeous plant. Oh, trilliums. There's so many trilliums. And y'all in Tennessee, y'all know, y'all are the highest number of species of trillium anywhere in the world, I think. But if you looked at it from a bioregion and not a political boundary, then it's all of us in southern Appalachia. The wake robin, the trillium rectum, everything about trilliums is in threes, and even 3 different types of trilliums, erect, nodding, and sessile. This is the wake robin, such a beautiful flowering plant. You know, a lot of folks know that their seeds of trillium and some of these other spring wildflowers are dispersed by ants who take the seed, eat the fleshy, protein-rich eliosome, and then deposit the seed into their waste pile. Many don't realize that there's another insect that's involved in this too, and that's the yellow jackets. So let's hear some praise for the yellow jackets as they spread the trillium and the bloodroot seeds around. And so if you're ever walking in the woods and you're seeing trilliums here and there and here and there, but you see in one little spot or a couple spots, a whole cluster of trillium rising out from the same spot, then that was most likely a ant or yellow jacket nest. And it's really great. Trilliums in such abundance. This is the painted trillium, Trillium undulatum, and you can see that the margins of the petals and also the margins of the leaves, I know they're not really leaves, are undulated like wavy lays. And this one gets its name painted because it looks like an artist took a brush and painted that magenta stripe from the middle out a little bit. And then sometimes in the rain, you can see in this picture that the white petals get translucent, clear. And it really look like cellophane sometimes. I normally, if I'm walking in an acidic cove area in the spring for wildflowers, I don't walk very slow under rhododendrons because the acidic plants, there's less diversity. Unless it's the time for the painted trillium. They're an acidophile. They love growing under the mountain laurels and flame azaleas and along the Blue Ridge Parkway trails. This trillium is one of the 3 nodding species that live in the woods around me. This is Catesby's trillium. But I like calling it, that's Trillium catesby. I like calling it its other common name, though, bashful trillium, because it's a nodding trillium. So it's hiding under the leaves. And if you don't know that there's nodding trillium, you might walk by and think there's a big old trillium leaf, but there's no flowers. I wonder why it didn't bloom. But if you know, you can peek up under there. And with this one, I think she's embarrassed because she blushes that pink, and that's why they call it a bashful trillium. Such a beautiful flower. Moving into the end of spring and into summer, we get all these different bee balms. This is Monarda didyma or didymo, however you want to pronounce it. the red scarlet bee balm or red bee balm, or also called Oswego tea, because back in the Revolutionary War times, when the English cut off the supply of tea for everybody, people were freaking out and not able to get their English breakfast tea or their so they went walking into the woods and finding plants to replace their tea. And this is one they found that actually tastes very much like a Earl Grey. So they were able to use this and get tea. And there's a couple others, of course. New Jersey tea is one of the others. But interestingly, they didn't look at the only North American plant that would provide the caffeine that they're used to in their tea, because the yaupon holly got the unfortunate name of Ilex vomitoria due to a misinterpretation of Cherokee or other many different tribes' use of a black drink ceremony. But the yaupon holly and the Dahoon holly are the two plants in North America that have caffeine, and they won't make you vomit, I promise. People are starting to call it Appalachian mate, because the yaupon holly is related with yerba mate, which is Ilex peregrinaensis, South American plant. But these bee balms are so beautiful. I really find it interesting, and maybe someone can elucidate on this at another point. But in a garden setting, I always see the downy mildew taking over the bee balms. And everything I've been taught about downy mildew and other fungal diseases to deal with them culturally is to increase airflow and sunlight. Then I go walking in the woods in the middle of a deep, dark wood along a creek with very little sunlight and crowded with other plants. And these bee balms are just growing and growing, and they don't seem to show any of that downy mildew. So there may be something else going on. There's, of course, spotted bee balm. And, there's a little bee visiting this bee balm, right? No, that's not a bee. That's a bee mimic. That's one of the flies. Many people don't realize flies are the #2 pollinating insect in the world, after bees. So it's really fascinating. And then there's this one that is a naturally occurring hybrid between a red bee balm and a white bee balm. And this actual population is on the Blue Ridge Parkway in bloom right around the time of the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference. And there is a red bee balm, a scarlet bee balm right to the left of it, and a white bee balm to the right. And then this Monarda media, if that's what it really is, I don't know, is the hybrid right in between the two. And so every year, some of my friends collect a little bit of this seed and maybe a cutting, and then they give it a new cultivar name. I think that's how horticulture works. I love where I live. This is a photo taken from the top of Whiteside Mountain in Highlands, North Carolina. And unless you have been to the Highlands Plateau in the maybe June, July, you might never have seen a pink flowered locust like this, because this is a very rare and special plant for this region. This is a Hartwig's locust. Some people also call it clammy locust, but that name can apply to a different one. But Robinia hartwigii, and it's a narrow endemic that's only found on the high elevation granitic rock outcroppings in the Highlands Plateau. So just a handful of mountains that you can get to. But luckily, Whiteside Mountain, which is protected and open for hiking for the public, has a bunch of really great populations of it right at the top. And it's beautiful. This is a maybe a 12-foot, 15-foot tall at the most locust tree, and it's among my favorite of the flowering locusts, that's for sure. Hartwig's locust. Come walk in the woods with me in the summertime. I'll take you and see it. Sun drops on the Blue Ridge Parkway. Really fascinating. This is Oenothera fructicosa. It's related with evening primrose, of course, Oenothera biennis, but that one opens in the evening. This one opens in the morning. And it's another one of these long blooming plants, long blooming cycle, but each individual flower is only open for a short time. You can see all their buds ready to go behind there. And then I want to really point out the floppy, dangly floral parts, the pistils and stamens sticking out there, which really tell a story of moth and butterfly pollination, butterfly wing pollination. So if you notice, there's a red dot in the very center of the flower. That's where the nectar will be. And moth and butterfly do not land when they're feeding. They hover and they flap. And so they're in there drinking with their proboscis, the nectar, and picking up, depositing pollen almost accidentally by their wings flapping in it. And I had just learned about that a couple of years ago, and it's fascinating. Azaleas are also famous for butterfly wing pollination. Also, I don't know if this has made it into y'all's news feeds or not, or if you've seen any interesting talks by moth people, but it turns out butterflies aren't a thing. Butterflies aren't real. I mean, and I'm not saying something crazy like birds aren't real, that whole wacko conspiracy theory joke, but like butterflies are really kind of a smooth day flying moth. And in the family, the butterfly family, there's 24 groups below the family level in Lepidoptera, and 2 of them are what we call butterflies, and the other 22 are moths. And none of the rules that we were taught when we were younger about how to tell the difference between a moth and a butterfly hold up. So let's hear it for the moths. I got to hear a talk by Jim McCormick from Ohio on that topic. He's got a great book called Gardening, and he showed an image, Google search as part of his talk of Google searching images of the word butterfly, and it's all like, you know, happiness and flowers and joy and beauty. And then he did a similar image search of moth, and what you find is holes in your clothes, caterpillars eating your cereal in your house, or the Silence of the Lambs movie poster with the death head moth on the cover of it. And so we're really starting to try to change the narrative and sing and celebrate the beauty and diversity of moths, because they're really incredible, including helping keep this sun drops going in the summertime. This is one of St. John's worts, Hypericum. And if you know nothing about herbal medicine or the herbal use of plants for medicine, you've heard of St. John's wort having medicinal use. And it is, a couple of the species have real benefit for treating and dealing with anxiety and depression. And I don't want to make light of anxiety and depression. A lot of people suffer from it. I tend to wrap myself up in mine like it's a warm blanket and roll around in it a little bit. But every time I see a flower of a St. John's wort blooming, a Hypericum in bloom, I feel better immediately. And I think that speaks to some biophilia as well. Hypericum is the genus name for all the St. John's worts, and including this rare endemic from the high elevations of the Blue Ridge Mountains. This is the Appalachian St. John's wort, Hypericum bucklei. And it's a beautiful woody one, but it has a long use in European herbalism and folklore. And in fact, during the height of summer, around the summer solstice, or what became known as the Feast of St. John's Day, people would go off into pre-Christian Celtic folk and Druid people in the British Isles and the Germanic tribes would go into the fields and pick flowers of the Hypericum and bring it inside to their altar and decorate above their altars with the flowers. And that is actually reflected in the name of Hypericum, hyper meaning above and icum meaning icon, or your altar. So it was placed above the altar. The couple of species that are used medicinally. One of them is European. So I say grow in your garden and then harvest all the Hypericum perfoliatum that you want and leave the Hypericum punctatum for bees. Speaking of bees, there's actually a bee in this picture. It's in the bottom left with that big old fuzzy bumble looking bud on it. But the rest, of course, are these flower flies, these syrphid flies that are so beautiful. And this is the plant that is Direvilla sessilifolia, another that I only find in southern Appalachia at high elevations above 5,000 feet. But because it's a northeastern plant, it does well off the mountain too. And I have it growing in my yard because I bought some from Carolina Native Nursery. And it is a pollinating, attracting magnet. I even watch hummingbirds feed on it because it has the tubular flowers and really beautiful. Unlike a lot of my people that I work with and know in the native plant world, I love and celebrate common names and the diversity of common names. I'm studied in ethnobotany, and so the more common names a plant has, the more human uses and human connection it has. And I love it when there's multiple common names for plants. And I encourage people to be loose. Not with this one though. When I'm teaching this plant to people, I'm very careful to try to get them to call it southern bush honeysuckle, and don't shorten it to honeysuckle because then they might want to go buy it and they get that Japanese honeysuckle vine. And don't shorten it to bush honeysuckle. I don't need to tell that story to y'all in Tennessee. It's a nightmare of an invasive plant. But the southern bush honeysuckle, Direvilla sessilifolia, is a really beautiful shrub. Spreads by rooting. It's above arching canes, and really beautiful fall color for both the leaves and the seed heads. I found it interesting. It's sessilifolia, and you can see where the leaves attach to the stem, and there's no petiole. It's sessile, and that's why it's called that. And a bunch of years ago, I was at the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference listening to a person present on research into southern bush honeysuckle. And this botanist, she pointed out that there were, I think, 3 subspecies at the time. I don't know how that's held up to the systematic changes. And the way you told the difference between the 3 subspecies was by their petiole length. And that made me sit up in my chair because I'm like, wait a second, it's sessile. They don't have a petiole. Turns out they do. And the differences between the 3 different subspecies is one's petiole is 0.03 to 0.05 millimeters long. One is 0.05 to 0.09, and one's 0.07. And I learned that, and I just said, I'll forget it. They're all southern bush honeysuckle. Just walked away from that. I'll leave that to y'all. I love showing this picture and asking people and saying, isn't that a pretty flower? And everybody goes, yeah, it is. And I go, no, it's not. No, it's kind of a boring flower. It's green, the flower, and it's in this little tube, and it has a little yellow sticking out. And what's pretty are obviously the modified leaves of this scarlet paintbrush or Indian paintbrush. And I have high confidence on my ID on this one because in this area I live in, there's only one species. If I went a little bit towards Texas and out west, then you'd be in real trouble. But beautiful scarlet paintbrush, Indian paintbrush. This is in the Orobanchaceae family, which is the family that we've grouped all the hemiparasitic plants into. And so this plant has green parts, it has chlorophyll, and is able to make its own photosynthetic energy, but it also has a relationship with grasses that it grows with and links its roots up with the grass roots to get some of the nutrient from them as well. So it can make its own sugars and maybe get some water and nutrients with the help of the grasses. So it's a hemi or partially parasitic plant. Speaking of plants that eat, sharing nutrient with grass flowers is different than these flowers of the pitcher plant, the purple pitcher plant, which like to eat bugs, obviously. I just learned recently, though, that there is a partition. I thought between the insects that pollinate the flowers of the Sarracenias and the insects they like to eat, that's not the same. I thought they would make their flowers up high so they're not eating their pollinators, but it turns out they worked that out with the bugs long ago, and they're not going to eat the ones that are pollinating it. Such a beautiful flower for a really beautiful and interesting and creepy plant. If you're ever trying to teach plants to kids, start with the carnivorous plants, insectivorous pitcher plants. Just capture them like it did me. I made a pilgrimage a few years ago to Rowan Mountain Highlands, which is in the area that's decimated from Hurricane Helene, to see this flower, the Gray's Lily. Such a beautiful plant, only grows in that small area. Doesn't grow in the mountains near me. I'm a good 4-hour drive from Rowan Mountain, but it's in those Rowan Highlands and probably in the Tennessee. Beautiful leopard spotting prints on the inside and a nodding plant. So conservation is imperiled due to a fungal disease that in part is being spread by people touching the flowers, looking at them. So there were signs all around on the Rowan Highlands to not touch the flowers and just take pictures. So I did. This is a Turk's cap lily. And I really think that the timing for the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference, third week of July, pretty much forever and ever, was in part because this is in bloom on the sides of the roads at the Blue Ridge Parkway at the time where we're at the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference. It's probably not the only plant that was chosen for that time of year, but this is definitely a signature plant. And it can look similar, especially on younger ones, to the Carolina lily, Lilium michelii. This is such a superb flower that they called it Lilium superbum. And you can tell the difference between the two by if you notice at the base of the petals, each petal has a green arrow, and then all of those arrows are triangle added together make a green star that you can see when you look up into the flower. And that's really like to see if you're looking at the Carolina lily or the Turk's cap lily or a small Turk's cap lily. Because once they get big and they get enough sunlight, then they're going to be in super abundance and almost like a candelabra of flowers. This is Turk's cap lilies, and I love watching. This is another one that has the butterfly and moth wing pollination strategy, in addition to other insects pollinating it too. But I've seen many a butterfly hanging out and literally hanging underneath this thing as it's going in there. Summertime is famous also for yellow composite flowers. Yellow composites, we even have the term for them, the DYCs, damn yellow composite. They can be hard to tell apart. They're really beautiful. On the lower left here is the green-headed coneflower, Rudbeckia laciniata, and it's growing right next to one of my favorite fascinating plants and one that I really love to photograph in different stages. This is Filmy Angelica, Angelica triquinata, and it's got small, beautiful flowers, but the real show of its beauty is the architectural structure of its umbel and the seeds as they develop and get bigger and change color and pattern and texture, and they're really gorgeous. And when they're fully large and viable, you can actually pull off some of those seeds and chew on them. And they have a very similar digestive benefit that chewing on licorice does, or there's another Apiaceae plant that just left my mind. But I remember being taught a really fascinating thing about this flower, the Filmy Angelica, and that is it has nectar that is intoxicating to bees. So there are, when it's in flower, it is covered up and loaded with big old bumblebees. and you can watch them, and they get a little stumbly drunk, and they'll stumble around. You can mess with them. You can go give them high fives or pet their backs. They don't mind that you're bothering them. They're just sitting there drinking, and they will actually pass out on the flower sometimes, and sometimes they'll even fall off the flower in a drunken stupor and pass out at the base of the plant. Now, I'm not here to judge. We've all got that uncle, but they will wake up from their drunken stupor and fly right back to the bar and go right back to collecting nectar. And sometimes I don't know how they ever find their way home. There's that green-headed coneflower with beautiful butterfly, the pipevine swallowtail butterfly on it. Green-headed coneflower, Rudbeckia laciniata. It has another common name, and that is what it's called by Cherokee, Catawba, Creek, and some of the other southeastern indigenous tribes, and that's Sochan, Sochan, Sochen. And Sochan is actually one of the favorite spring greens of indigenous tribes of the southeast. And what you do is in the spring, when the leaves first emerge, you can harvest them, and it's a pot herb. It's a cooked herb. So you can saute them up or cook them in a pot with a bunch of other herbs and some good flavorings. And it's really great tasting. It has a very strong flavor. But really where it comes into play is it's a spring tonic herb. So if you remember how I was describing earlier in the talk, my feelings about winter, and after, well, first, y'all remember when we used to have winter? That is sad. But now, you get that first warm day that comes in the late winter, and it's like, oh, there is hope in the world. Well, eating Sochan, for me, eating a big mess of it gives me that hopeful feeling from the inside out. It makes my fingertips tingle with springtime energy. And it's a really delicious thing. And it's also really great too, because if you're a gardener and you grow greens, you know that once they bolt, you stop eating them. Bolting means making flowers. So when the Sochan bolts, it bolts into the green-headed coneflower, and you get to enjoy the beautiful flower and the butterflies, where these day-flying moth gets to nectar from them. And it's a really win-win all around. Orchid season is summertime, and it's just fascinating. So many different orchids. This is the yellow fringed orchid, Phytanthera ciliaris, and for a long time, I was mad that this plant was called yellow fringed orchid because it's obviously orange. And I know a lot of people that are trying to start calling it orange fringed orchid, and I'm pushing back against that because there's another orchid that's orange fringed. But if you look at this photo, the fringes are yellow. The flower is orange, but the fringes are yellow. So it's not yellow comma fringe. It's more like yellow dash fringe, yellow fringed orchid. Really beautiful plants. Orchids abound in the summertime. They can be big and showy like the yellow fringe, like this purple. This is the greater purple fringed orchid on the left there. And then they can be really, really tiny. And one of my favorite things about myself is that I'm this big giant of a human that likes little tiny flowers. Like, give me the smallest flowers. And this is the green adder's mouth orchid, Malaxis unifolia. And for scale, that's a strawberry leaf vine. And so that's how tiny that flower is. And in that, and it maybe grows like 4, a little bit 6 inches, maybe a little more if it's really happy. But the flower head is maybe an inch or so, inch and a half, 2 inches. And in that, there could be 60 flowers in bloom all at once, and they're tiny. And I would love to know what tiny insect is responsible for pollinating. If you know, there's a tiny, tiny bug flying in there. That's not a dandelion, obviously. That's not a grass, is it? But this flower has the name grass of Parnassus. And it's not growing in a Greek island from mythology, Parnassia, but it's growing at seepage along the Blue Ridge Parkway at the vertical bog. Really beautiful flower and beautiful leaves. We have 2 species in the mountains and 3 species in the state of North Carolina. This is the Acerifolia, kidney leaf grass of Parnassus. Because those rounded leaves you can see at the base of the flower in this picture are said to look like the rounded leaves of the deciduous wild ginger or Acerum canadensis. There is still hope for Appalachia, and there's hope for monarch butterflies. And when we think of monarch butterflies and flowers, we think of the milkweeds, or what I like to call the milk flowers, because they're really important for, they're the host plant for the caterpillars. But when it comes to fall migration of monarch butterflies, it is the fall weedy blooming plants that are really so hard to get to survive through what I call a crazy guy with weeds who likes to chop them down, because up until they bloom for 3/4 of the growing season, they just look like green weeds to people. But then these asters pop. This photo was taken at one of their known roost sites up on the Blue Ridge Parkway at the Caney Fork Overlook. So when the monarchs are passing through in their annual migration south on the East Coast, a bunch of them come and spend the night in the red spruce trees right here at the Caney Fork Overlook. And if I time it right, I can go hang out with hundreds and hundreds of monarch butterflies flitting around. As long as the maintenance department for the Blue Ridge Parkway didn't cut all the flowers down ahead. Or like this year, of course, right during the timing of the monarch migration is when the Hurricane Helene was coming up. And these insects are fascinating. They sensed it. They knew the hurricane was coming and they diverged their pattern. They'll do that if there's storms. They'll roost and settle down. It's really fascinating. There is a part of me that really hopes we never figure out the answer to this. I like having mysteries in the world. And I like getting to hang out with hundreds of monarch butterflies in a beautiful spot like that. But the asters are really important. Fall blooming. If you work crossword puzzles, then this is the easy gimme. You get a fall flower, and every time it's 5 letters and it's aster. Just don't tell the New York Times crossword puzzle people that they're not in the genus Aster anymore, because I don't want to try to spit Symphyotrichum or Eurybia into a crossword puzzle. But I'm in love with this photograph, and for me, it is this curl up in the top right that I just get drawn to every time. The unfurling of their petals. It's really a fascinating thing. Again, this is not a identifiable or descriptive photo, but more artsy. This is a top-down view of one of the shade-loving goldenrods. Goldenrods, of course, get a bad reputation in the world. Karen, I see you have beautiful goldenrods behind you in your image, and they still get blamed for causing fall seasonal allergies. And of course, we know scientifically that that's not possible, because the pollen of goldenrod is too wet, large, and heavy to fly into the air. And the only way to get the pollen of goldenrod into your nose to cause a histamine reaction is if you picked one of the flower stalks and shoved it up into your nose. And I really don't recommend doing that, because the bees love it so much. There might be a bee on there, and it'll sting you on the inside of your nose. You'll definitely have a histamine reaction to that. Now, I'm not a big conspiracy theory person. I think there's some real world problems that we could focus on instead of some of the seemingly wacko conspiracy theories out there. But I also have a very healthy distrust for certain large multinational corporate industries, specifically the petroleum industry, the pharmaceutical industry, and the seed and pesticide industry. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. That's all one company, I think. And so we've known for years and years that the goldenrod does not cause fall seasonal allergies. But if you watch television and you see commercials for Claret and some of these other allergy meds, there will be golden flowers in the background very subtly. And if you go to a pharmacy at a grocery store or a real pharmacy and look at the store brand medication, it will have a picture of tall or Canada goldenrod on the actual cover of the allergy medication. And here's where the conspiracy comes in, because not only do goldenrods not cause fall seasonal allergy, but you can make a tea from the flowering parts and the above ground leaves of goldenrods that relieves the symptoms of fall seasonal allergies better than any of those medications, with no side effects and very few contraindications. So celebrate the goldenrod, and it's a delicious tea, I think. I tend to get melancholy in the fall. I used to get sad when I'd see the goldenrod start to bloom because I thought they were a fall flower. Now I realize they're a late summer flower that blooms in the fall. But when it's time for the gentians, there's no denying that the end of the year is coming and the end of the blooming season is coming. And I consider the gentians like this balsam mountain gentian, Gentiana latidens, that's a narrow endemic. I consider them the fall, last flower of the year. Granted, every time I see that, the witch hazels over there yelling at me. Like, come on. But it is true that for me, the herbaceous flowering season tends to run from trout lily to gentian. And these closed bottle type gentians are really fascinating to watch, because that plant right there, that flower is fully open. That's as in bloom as it's going to get. And what happens for pollination is really fun to watch. A bumblebee, like one of the carpenter bees or one of the bigger bumbles, will land on top of that pointed flower, pry open those petals, climb down into the flower, and disappear into it. The petals close back around it, but not all the way. And then you can see the bumble bumbling its way, getting nectar and doing the pollination. And you can see it like bumping into the side of the flower petals at the base. And then when it's got all the nectar out of there, it backs its fuzzy bumblebee butt out of there and goes on to the next flower. Now, I'm always curious about how watching pollinating insects or hummingbirds, how do they know which flower has nectar and which doesn't? And I've spent way too long sitting and watching flowers. I'm sure some of y'all can have an affinity with that. But what I've noticed with the gentians is that the bees, they land on the top, and if the flower isn't fully closed back, they don't even investigate down into it. And I expect that the amount of time it takes for those petals to reclose themselves is equal to the amount of time it takes for the nectar to be regenerated by the plant. So it gives an indication that don't waste your time coming in here. The restaurant's not open yet. So from trout lily to gentian, walking in the woods, Bigelow's botanical excursions. I love doing this virtually, but of course my favorite is to actually walk with y'all and show you the plants and let you get to touch them and smell them and maybe even eat them. So I really thank you for your time today. And yes, that is me years ago eating a trout lily flower. It's really last little story about trout lilies and edibility. The flowers are edible. I don't eat a lot of them, and I definitely don't eat the first one of the year. The leaves are edible too, but you don't want to eat too much. And so my friend and mentor in this work, Dr. David Kozo, ethnobotanist, who is an expert on Cherokee ethnobotany, did a lot of his PhD work was matching up the lineal system and the Cherokee system, and he spent time working through James Mooney's research into the Cherokee prior to their removal. And Cherokee, I live in Cherokee country and right in adjacent county to the eastern band of the Cherokee Indian. And I know a bunch of people who are enrolled members and adjacent to it. And in general, Cherokee people are hilarious. They joke. they joke, they love making fun of each other and poking fun, lighthearted, and they really love making fun of white folk. And David Kozo suggests that the two stories collected about trout lily, from James Mooney's papers in the mid 19th century, were one of those jokes about on the silly white folk, because there's two medicinal uses collected from two different sources on the trout lily. One, the trout lily is a contraceptive agent, and so you can get the contraceptive benefit by eating large amounts of the leaves, according to this one collected story. And then another collected story, and this actually holds up and it's true, is that if you eat a large amount of the trout lily leaves, it causes projectile vomiting, which, if you think about it, would be a very successful contraceptive agent. I don't think anybody's getting down. Well, it's all coming up. So I thank you for your time and listening to my silly jokes and stories about plants and flowers. And I, like you, can't wait for the return of wildflowers in the spring and the return of the trout lily. And I will end my hearing and turn it back over, and I have time for questions.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I enjoy your humor. I suspect a lot of them do.
And you get in trouble sometimes.
Well, let's see. I'm looking through the comments.
Yeah, sorry about my voice. I don't know. It usually works. I don't know why it didn't, but
Who
hopefully
knows? I commented back when you were showing the geraniums. Mine were blooming. My wild geraniums were blooming up until 2 weeks ago.
ow.
Of course, I also have coral honeysuckle that blooms year round.
Yeah, I've got coral honeysuckle on this house, and it's got flowers on it now, and as into December.
And strangely, it's on the harshest side of the house. It faces the cold winds, the desiccating winds, the hottest heat of the day in the summer, and then it blooms. It just keeps blooming. It's not consistent in January. I might not have very many flowers or any flowers in January, but beyond that, it'll be blooming.
I love the coral because, of course, it's a hummingbird feeder. Also a hummingbird calendar. So mine starts blooming just days before the hummingbird gets to town. And then it's really cool because it's the host plant for one of the hummingbird mimic, the moth, the hawk moth or the sphinx moth. I see somebody raising their physical hand. That's Lori Bruno. You need to unmute. You gotta unmute. Yeah, it's on. You got bet you Karen can walk you through it. It's on the actual app that you're looking at, not on your phone.
Thank you.
No, it's
Okay, thank you.
there you go.
I have a question about North Carolina and how it's looking up there. And as far as like Carver's Gap and in that area, can you give me any information?
Yeah, I don't have Carver's Gap, but I will say that in the Hurricane Helene areas, south slopes were wiped out. Like over 40% of the trees in Buncombe County are down. And rivers and creeks been scoured to bedrock and below. So there's not, in some areas, there's not even any residual for like recovery and stuff. You're seeing pure bedrock layers.
So do you think they'll be hiking this summer there?
Well, yeah, because not all of Western North Carolina was impacted. So I live in Jackson County,
Mm.
and we were impacted by the storm, but not at the extent of the counties around Asheville. The Great Smoky Mountains National Park was mostly unscathed. The Great Balsams, the Highlands Plateau, all those areas are open for hiking and stuff now. And I did, for those of you that maybe know the area on the parkway called the Vertical Bog, as soon as the parkway opened up, I drove up there to make sure that that didn't get washed away, and it didn't. It's still intact. So there's a lot of areas, and there's a lot of resilience. But then there's some areas like Rattlesnake Lodge. I saw some photographs on the hike on the Mount Sea Trail to Rattlesnake Lodge, and it looked like a war zone bombing. There's a lot of that.
So is the parkway open all the way now?
I mean, I think it is, but I would have to. Most of it's open, if not open all the way.
Do you know if 40 was repaired?
40 has not prepared. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I
They're
can.
working on 40.
Do y'all mind if I jump in here for a second?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I saw on our local news today there are places in East Tennessee that are just now kind of the devastation there is just now being discovered. So let's not forget about Irwin,
Mhm.
you know,
Yeah.
and hearts out to everybody.
Yeah.
I grew up in southeastern North Carolina, you know, never ever heard about that kind of flooding in the mountains ever.
Oh. You know, one thing, up until Hurricane Helene, many of us, myself included, felt that the Southern Appalachian Mountains were a great place to write off the impending apocalypse of climate change and biodiversity loss and all of that.
When
And
I
so,
was sorry, I'm not trying to interrupt, but when I was growing up, it was where people went to retire.
right, they still do. But that
Yeah.
bubble now burst of there are no safe places. There are no safe places on this planet from where you can hide from the climate change impacts. And this is just the beginning. I used to be really doom and gloom because I've studied a lot of this. I have degrees in environmental science. But it's still doom. I'm just going for less gloom because
Well,
there's out there.
the thing that put me on the trajectory that I ended up on was Edward O. Wilson's The Future of Life.
It's a sadness, but as,
You have to participate. And you have to try to make it better, right?
We can barely hear you.
I'm sorry. It's because I'm getting all passionate. I said it because you have to participate. You know, you have to be there.
We've lost you, Anne.
participate. What I would add to that is, as you all know, there's so many really big problems and things that we're dealing with in the world right now, and many of them are outside of our individual capacity to have any kind of effect on. But one thing, and so like we're not going to recycle or bring our grocery bags to the grocery store and get out of climate change or biodiversity loss. But each one of our yards can have immediate direct impact on biodiversity loss and resilience native plants and removing invasives. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, but I like to preach.
Oh, you should continue to preach.
I ain't give up. I'm not passing it off to the next generation. It's mine. I'm at fault. I'm responsible. But also, I just want to point out that this whole idea of personal individual responsibility and the carbon footprint was created by British Petroleum and some of the other large petrochemical companies to deflect the fault onto them. So the number one litterer in the world is Coca-Cola, not the guy dropping the Coca-Cola bottle on the side of the road. And the Hurricane Helene might have been better Hurricane Exxon.
And I have to chime in and say I couldn't agree with you more. And we vote with our dollars. We vote with our dollars in so many ways.
Do you think that fracking is a part of it too?
Say again?
Do you think that fracking is a part of it too?
All extractive fossil fuel resources, yeah. So we've had the technology and the know-how to get ourselves into a renewable energy system for a long time, but it's been stopped because it's a threat to profitability.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Memphis was on a completely electric streetcar system until the car companies decided that they saw a profit in Memphis streets and put a stop to the completely electric, completely self-sufficient public transportation that we had.
Well, I think we're getting away from the flowers.
Right,
So-
we are, but it's also interrelated. It really is.
It is, but we have a lot of questions yet or at least some questions. One comment by Yolanda was, the fruit looks like a miter. It's not the flower, it's the fruit.
Fruit looks like a miter? I'll have to look at it again. So the
Yeah.
fruit, it's like a little cup, and then the black seeds sit into it.
I don't know. I'm gonna have to take a look.
And then the miter hat is it's the fringes. I think, as far as I understand, the fringes on the miter hat that were resembling the fringes on the flower. But I love stories, even conflicting one. I believe all of them equally.
And yeah, that I'm sorry to interrupt again, but a coworker and I were talking about the origin of the name hydrangea, and you could look up hydrangea and find 10 different descriptions of why hydrangea was named hydrangea.
Sure. One comment is, oh, good Lord, DNA sequencing, changing all my fungi names. Now they're coming for the butterflies.
So it's not the butterfly names that are it's more of a celebration of moth.
Another comment, Cindy says lemonade moth is as pretty as any butterfly.
Mm-hmm.
The rosy maple moth, that's a beautiful one, isn't it?
I don't know if Bart's still on, he's a good one for those. For all the different flowers, the moths and butterflies.
We've started celebrating moths at the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference. Our buddy Lenny Lample from Charlotte, North Carolina, has given a big moth talk a few years, but he also, when the weather's conducive, which it wasn't this year, sets up a mothing sheet. So in the evening, we go out into the dark and go mothing. And if you've not participated in something like that, it's a lot of fun. I do it at my house just by leaving my doors open.
Is that the same moth guy from the University of Kentucky?
No.
Okay. There's another moth guy, I think it's from the University of Kentucky, who's doing the same kind of thing.
Yeah, it's a very common way of studying moths. And there's a big, sadly, it's the same weekend as the Cullowhee Native Plant Conference, but I think it's in West Virginia, and they call it Mothapalooza.
Okay, I think that's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah.
I believe, yeah, I heard it on a podcast with the uh native plant guides, I think it was.
Yeah. Native Plant Podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah. Know those guys.
We have a lot of folks that have said, thank you, very interesting, great talk, thank you. Eric, I'm interested in ethnobotany. Do you find it useful in your day-to-day life?
I definitely do. So ethnobotany is the study of the relationship of people. And we are a culture and society that's plant blind, and we don't really think about plants and their roles in our lives. Of course, we all do because we're native plant folk. But people even forget, like if you're wearing a cotton shirt right now, you're wearing a plant. And so the ways that people interact with plants, for me, I'm the proud son of a children's librarian. I grew up in a library surrounded by stories and books. And so it's the stories of plants that really drew me in. And it's the storytelling around plants that is my bread and butter. But it didn't take me long to be talking about this can be used for medicine, or this can be eaten as edible, to go, oh, well, why aren't I using this for medicine? Or why aren't I eating this foods? And so just like with that brief nutritional story on the violets, so many of the wild foods are loaded with nutritional benefit. And when it comes to, excuse me, day-to-day medicine, now I'm very thankful for modern scientific advancements. If I get my leg cut off, I would like a medically trained doctor to sew it all back together for me. I don't want to put a salve on it to get my leg to reattach itself. Saying that though, once it's healing and it is sewn back and we're into wound care, that's where the plant medicine works way better than those pharmaceutical medicines. And I actually have intimate relationship with that very thing, because I had a traumatic leg wound. That I had a very progressive wound care doctor, and we were able to treat infections using plant medicine. So oil of oregano, thymol is the active compound, is antimicrobial like crazy. So you can actually use it to, it's effective against MRSA, it's effective against strep. You can deal with different infections. So when it comes to colds and flu, whatever y'all want to do on your flu shot is fine. My flu shot is elderflower, elderberry. It is among the highest antiviral plants in the woods. And right before you get sick in the flu season, which we're entered, and you get that, oh gosh, I hope I'm not getting sick feeling, and then 2 days later you're sick. If you start consuming elder syrup, elderberry extract, or elderflower tea at that time, you won't get sick. Or if you do, your symptoms will be highly reduced and your flu will only last 2 days. And I can point you to the National Institute of Health linked research on that. And so even like the pharmaceutical treatment for flu, Tamiflu, will give you, instead of 9 days of flu symptoms, you only have 5, but its side effects are upset stomach and vomiting. So then you got the flu and you're throwing up for 5 days. That doesn't sound fun, but you can take elderflower and elder syrup and not get sick at all. So I vote for that.
I don't go on vacation without it.
All right. And if I'm teaching the kids, if I'm giving a talk at a school, I will pre-dose with this. Girl.
Well, that says, thank you, Adam. Informative as always. Hoping to take a walk with you next year.
Yeah, come on. Somebody said,
Stacy says some of our plants think it's spring. My obedient plant is in full bloom right now.
crazy.
I saw an
Uh,
iris in full bloom today.
They
I did.
pop every year if it gets cold and it warms up. But seeing some of these resilient they should know better. Southeastern doing it. It's really cause for alarm. A friend of mine, Bob Dellinger, around here, in Carolina botany circles, shared a picture of one of the deciduous azaleas having a bud burst. That's just not okay.
Oh, I have that. I have an azalea bush. It's
Is it-
not a twice bloomer, and it's blooming.
Is it one of like the Korean hybrids, like the white showy ones?
No, it's like a it's between a pink and a red.
Right.
Mhm.
There's azaleas that are common landscape plants that have a lot of different colors. They're usually the hybrid of the Korean azaleas and they will bloom in the fall, early winter very commonly. But
Really? Okay.
and if they have evergreen leaves and they're called an azalea, then they're from Asia. But the deciduous azaleas, native ones, blooming is cause for concern.
There's a lot of comments about Thanksgiving tomatoes. A lot of us have tomatoes.
So wild.
Uh, um,
I see Anne Valentine said that they would love to have me speak to another plant club. And yes, I love speaking to plant clubs, garden groups. I am for hire. Hire me. I will come. Oh.
Okay. That,
careful, she's all the way over in Memphis.
yeah, I'm way out.
Fine, we can work it out.
Okay, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, we can talk about that at another time. I'll
I actually just went to your website and contacted you via Contact Us to make sure I remembered this.
we'll figure it out.
Okay,
All
great.
right. Erica asks, how did you get your education in ethnobotany?
I am taught a lot of these things, and then I got to I was really lucky. I had gone back to school as an adult to study plants, and I got to take classes from David Kozo, who was affiliated with Western Carolina University for a very brief window, and I just happened to be going to school then. And then we've maintained a working relationship and friendship after that, and reading books, reading wildflower guides. You know, I've always been impressed with the amount of ethnobotanical information in the Wildflowers of Tennessee, Ohio Valley, and Southern Appalachia. That's
Yeah.
limited stuff. And just finding more and more interest in it, so I continue reading up on the subject.
And people are curious. So years ago, I was teaching high school sciences, environmental sciences in South Jersey, and we would go out into the Pinelands forest and see all kinds of wonderful ecosystems in there, ecotones, and I would show them sphagnum moss, and I said, I had learned that the dried sphagnum is what the Indians used for diaper material when they papoosed the baby, so it wasn't dripping down their backs.
Also for menstrual bleeding.
And
I learned
in some of the classes I took, they also apparently lichens were very important
Mhm.
baby care
Yeah.
in their papooses, which I think is just that to me that's just lovely that you had a diaper of lichens.
lichen. You know, the lichen we call reindeer moss can actually it's a Cladonia species. It can actually absorb 200 times its volume in liquid.
Oh,
Wow. Oh my God.
I believe it after watching it. For those who are doubters, pour a little bit of the water from your water bottle on some dry reindeer moss and see how much it absorbs before it looks like it might be even slightly damp.
We
Yeah.
can,
You watch it swell up.
we don't have those lichens out here in West Tennessee. We've got
I'll bet you do.
we've got absolutely beautiful lichens. Bark
Ugh.
more the bark it here in lichens that really rehydrate when it rains, but we don't have many of the lichens that hang down off of trees.
Oh yeah.
Reindeer moss is on the ground.
We don't really have that. There are
I
parts.
bet you do. I bet I can
go
find
up-
some. I'll
You
come
can go
walk
up
with you
into
somewhere.
northern Shelby County. It's there. It's there in northern Shelby County. But if you go down into T.O. Fuller State Park, there's not nearly as much. It's interesting, just
Mhm.
that
You,
slight change in the soil.
you pay me my exorbitant, outrageous fee to come present to your garden group.
We don't have that kind of money.
All right.
But no,
Okay.
yeah, I definitely want. We are in search of. We're filling up the 2025 calendar right now, so
Yeah.
I'd like to stay in touch.
I do this for work.
I want to thank you, Adam. It's way past our normal closing time, but we've all been having so much fun. So,
Very much.
and we hope we haven't kept you away from anything. And it's been a pleasure having you as our guest. And hopefully it'll drum up a little business for you.
I'll come visit Appalachia. We could use your tourist dollars next year.
I know you could.
I want to close like I like to close off and just let y'all know that the love of plants is reciprocal. They love you too. And at any place you're at, going on around you, you can stop, slow yourself down, quieten everything, look around and find something beautiful.
You can.
So true.
It's a lovely parting thought. So I want to say thank you
Thank you.
for all those that have left comments that say thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And there's many of them. I think most people before they signed off said thank you. So we appreciate it. We appreciate your time, and the check's in the mail.
All right. Do it for love and I do it for money.
I know. And we're here because this is something we love.
I do.
So
Bye, y'all. Thank y'all.
Good night, everyone.
thank you so very much.
I'll see
It's
you.
been fun.